Today's topic is God's sovereignty and the issue of sin, or is God the author of sin? This is one of those challenging theological questions, and that relationship, how does sin exist if God is sovereign? Within the Calvinistic camp, we explicitly and categorically reject the false idea that God is the author of sin. Yet at the same time, God ordains everything, including allowing sin to exist. He remains perfectly holy and just. And I'll just say this here, sin exists or comes about from the human heart. The Bible consistently teaches that God is perfectly holy, righteous, and just. And although he is sovereign over all creation, Scripture is also clear that he does not commit sin, nor is he the author of sin. And this is an important point. He does not commit sin, nor is he the author of sin. The scriptural basis for this, and there is a number of scriptures, and we'll only touch on a few of those. And one, for example, is 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. This is the message that we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. That's the Apostle John speaking. There is no sin in God. James chapter 1, verses 13 through 15. Jesus' brother, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil. He himself does not tempt anyone, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then, when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is fully matured, it brings forth death. Sin arises from the sinful desires of human hearts, not from God. Another one is in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 13. The prophet Habakkuk speaking, he says about God, your eyes are too pure to see evil, and you cannot look on trouble. That is just in the first part of that text. God's holiness and purity are incompatible with sin. To say that he is the author of sin is to bring a charge against him that is not true. Now, God's decree includes allowing sin to exist, but that does not make him the originator of sin. Because God is perfectly holy and sin does not proceed, or sin does not come from him. This is an important part to understand. Allowing sin to exist does not make him the originator of sin. Again, sin originates in the hearts of humanity. Matthew chapter 15, verses 18 through 19, for example. But the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and those defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thefts, false witnesses, slanders. There we can see clearly from Matthew's gospel that sin is the product of the human heart. That heart that corrupted by the fall, not a reflection of God's character. Again, to bring that charge against God is to charge God falsely. There's implications there is that humanity bears full responsibility for sin, and God's holiness remains unstained by human rebellion. God's holiness is not marred by human rebellion. Again, he is not the author of that sin. Now, we find that God's sovereignty over sin is that, for example, in Genesis 50, verse 20, that you may know very well, it says these words, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to do what has happened on this day to keep many people alive. This is Joseph speaking, that even the evil actions of Joseph's brothers who sold him into slavery, beat him and sold him into slavery, were under God's sovereign plan for good, and it kept many people alive. Or look at Proverbs chapter 16, verse 4. The Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. Or Acts chapter 2, verse 23, where Peter is speaking about Jesus, and he says this man, referring to Jesus, delivered over by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God, you nailed to a cross by the hands of lawless men and put him to death. In other words, God ordained the crucifixion of Christ using sinful actions of men to accomplish salvation for many, to accomplish salvation for the elect. We could then say that God governs sin without being the author of it. And not only is he not the author of it, he's not tainted by it. He's not marred by sin. God uses even sinful actions of sinful men to accomplish his righteous purposes. And at the same time, the sinners that do these things are accountable, are responsible for their sinful actions. Man is not absolved from their sin because God allows it to happen. From the Calvinistic viewpoint, then, we would say this. Number one, God is not the author of sin. James 1, 13 through 15. Sin originates in the human heart. Matthew 15, verses 18 through 19. God's sovereignty includes sin without compromising his holiness. Habakkuk 1, verse 13. And God governs sin for his glory and for our good and for his purposes. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, and Acts chapter 2, verse 23. So also from the Calvinistic viewpoint, that Calvinism exalts God's sovereignty while maintaining his holiness and justice. The existence of sin is not a reflection of God's character, but of humanity's fallen nature. Even in the presence of sin, God's sovereign purposes prevail for his glory and for the good of his elect people. Well, that's all I have for today. I pray that you have a wonderful afternoon. Go forth and God bless you. Thank you.